hey, you ought to look at that executive director position. And my first reaction was, nah, it's not for me. I'd rather sit down here on the beach and throw stones.
Right.
And I had some key mentors that really encouraged me. I was pretty frank, pretty honest in the interviews. And so I thought, maybe they're not looking for my personality. I don't know. Turns out they were. And so that was that. And here we sit. I started in January. It was a long process.
Hey, Blue Grit, we are back this week. It is your co-host Clint, and I've got a guest co-host sitting in, Mr. John Sariga, Director of Field Services and Legislative Affairs. How are you?
I'm well, sir. It's nice to be here once in a while.
Yeah. Tyler bailed on us, and we got a superstar sitting in his place now.
I wouldn't say that, but thank you.
We have a cool episode that may run a bit long. There's a lot to dive into. You want to introduce our guest?
Absolutely. So to my left, Gretchen Grigsby. Now, Gretchen, I'm going to let you talk about yourself, your background, and what you do at TCOLE.
Okay. I am Gretchen Grigsby. As John said, I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. I will have been there for 10 years this October, and it's been a great honor and privilege so far, and we've got a lot to do. I've seen a lot of change there. I came there from the Texas Senate, where I worked on the Senate Committee on Agricultural, Rural Affairs, and Homeland Security. That sounds like it doesn't go well together at all, but there is a nexus there, I promise, and most of that is the 1,255-mile border along the Texas-Mexico border. I came there from DPS, where I spent about 3 years in the government relations section there, and I was fortuitous enough to get there through the boss that I worked for, a gentleman named Steve McCraw, who hired me as a punk 23-year-old into the office of the governor, what was then the governor's office of Homeland Security. So all in all, it's been a really interesting career so far, and look forward to all the good things that come in the future.
Well, thank you for being here. For us, you are an absolute pleasure to deal with at the legislature. And also with all the work, thank you for all the work you do at the Texas Peace Officer Memorial.
Thank you.
It's a huge task that you take the lead on every year, and you do a great job. Our other guest, Chief Greg Stevens. Greg, I've known you for probably 10 years now. I'm going to let you kind of talk about your background, your history with Lubbock PD, and then becoming chief, and now TCOLE.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come and sit and talk with you guys and have an opportunity to kind of reach law enforcement across the state of Texas, and I think probably beyond. I think you guys are followed even beyond Texas. I did my career, most of the majority of it, in Lubbock. I've been in law enforcement more than 35 years now. Was when I started. They asked me to put together or update my bio, and that number. I thought, man, I'm an old head now. And
you and me both.
Yeah, my first, I got into this job, this career, actually as a military police officer. It's all I wanted to do growing up was be a police officer. My dad was an Amarillo police officer. I was born and raised in Amarillo, but they had nepotism rules back all the way up to somewhere around 96 or so. So that wasn't. I kept hoping, that's where I would end up, because I was a kid, wanted to stay home, and I didn't go to college right out of high school. I wasn't that kid. In fact, I barely got out of high school, literally. That's a whole other story. So I went into the military, went into the Air Force first, and went in a month after high school as a military police officer. I was a canine handler, actually.
Through Lackland.
That's exactly right. Had my the Air Force Police Academy. Back then it was with the Marine Corps. They were co-joined there. First duty assignment was in Fairbanks, Alaska. So I was a base patrolman and a canine handler. And since that's considered an overseas tour, that's where I did all my time. And when I got off active duty in 92, Amarillo I couldn't even apply. I looked at DPS. They had a hiring freeze at the time where they were putting DL troopers back in highway patrol. So they said it may be in a year, but I needed a job then. I couldn't wait a year. And so I applied across the state, kind of took the shotgun approach. I applied from Texarkana to San Antonio, all through the Metroplex. Tested in Lubbock and did really well. And it's close to home, the same size. And so that was it. Other than that, I didn't know much about Lubbock, didn't know anyone in Lubbock. But I started the academy, the Lubbock Police Academy, in October of 1992. And spent almost 27 years there. I had the the great opportunity of working throughout the whole department. I'm not sure there was 300 officers at that time whenever I started. If there was, it wasn't many more than 300. And became the chief in Lubbock in 2015. And I can't say enough positive about the Lubbock Police Department or about the city of Lubbock. What a great place it is to live, work, raise a family, everything. Loved it. Texas Tech University. It's where I went to, got a graduate degree there. And when I retired, I had an opportunity to go live on the coast, and went to Rockport, Texas.
That kind of caught, I think, everybody off guard. It caught us off guard. I think it caught Lubbock PD because things were going really well at Lubbock. We did a management survey there before you took the chief spot, and then we had several years where things went really, really well at Lubbock PD, and then it caught us off guard. We were surprised.
I'll tell you, I wasn't exactly ready to leave Lubbock, but what I knew, having been in law enforcement at that time for a long time, and watching chiefs, had some good mentors, and all of them told me, they said, don't take a chief's job unless you could walk out the next day, so that you can make good decisions, so that you don't have to have that job, right? And they all said, listen, the tenure, if you're doing good, the tenure for chiefs is somewhere between 2 to 6 years.
Yep.
And I kept thinking about that, and I was coming up on year 4. And if you remember, again, we worked together on a lot of different things. And when I took the chief's job, we were just going under a consent decree. The department had been sued by the DOJ.
That's right.
For discriminatory hiring practices. One, I don't think was, I didn't put as much credence in it, but the other side of it, when I looked at everything involved in that, I think that through no intention, no design or anything, but just by the way our hiring practices were for physical agility, we were actually, through disparate impact, we needed to improve that. And we did. But I say that to say that we weren't going to be able to fight that and win. You couldn't fight one without fighting the other, and we were going to lose the one, so we were going to lose it all. So we had to go into a consent decree, and manpower was tough. There was a lot of issues and problems in the department, hence the management survey at the time. And coming into 2019, the consent decree was ending, it was over. Our strength was good, our manpower was good, crime was going down, so everything was good. And I looked at it and I thought, I'm not sure that it's going to get any better. And again, if you know anything about Texas Tech, when Tech wins, they celebrate in a spectacular way. And
my daughter went to Tech. I think Clint's got family that went to Tech too, so we know
they can get out of hand when they win. If Tech doesn't win, it's usually pretty calm. But I'd seen,
we call it peaceful protest.
That's and it was.
It's not a riot; it's a peaceful protest.
So, as I'm standing on Broadway with tear gas in my nose, whatever that speaks to you. So in March of 2019, Tech was in the Final Four. They were having a great year. They'd won in the Final Four, and they were going to the national championship. And I had actually, a couple of days before, I was on the TPCA, Texas Police Chiefs website, and I was registering for the annual conference that year. And I saw an advertisement for Rockport, Texas, for the Chiefs job in Rockport, Texas. And we used to vacation down there. We used to go to Port Aransas and all that area and loved it. A little slice of heaven down there. And I thought, man, what a great job. So small department, 27 officers, got 4 or 5 civilian employees. I thought, man, that'd be like paradise. I could lower my golf handicap. I could fish. I hadn't fished in forever because Lubbock's a big city.
No college celebrations.
No, so then I wasn't. I'm like, I don't know, because I loved Lubbock. It was my department, and so then after we won the Final Four, I'm down on Broadway. If you know Lubbock, you know where Broadway and University is. I got a line. I got some great pictures from it. Some of Lubbock's finest out in riot gear, standing up there holding the line. There's a car overturned and everybody's standing on top. There's a couch on fire. And if you know the Lime scooters, they burn well. and they'd call for another one, the crowd would, and they'd see a scooter go over the top, get the fire going again, and I get the tear gas in my nose, and I thought, I don't know, maybe it's time. And you get that where you go, feel it, that's it. And so I sent a resume and interviewed, and that was it. It really was kind of where it went, and so there we go. Went down to the coast, and we were about to be empty nesters. Well, my wife and I, our twins, our youngest two, were graduating high school. And so rather than sit around the house and hang out, we went on an adventure. And so, continuing on, we were doing great. And I was one of the chiefs around the state watching the TCOLE sunset bill, the sunset process that went through 2 legislative sessions. And I kind of got interested in it. And I had some mentors. I had some other chiefs, some other people around the state that said, hey, you ought to look at that executive director position. And my first reaction was, nah, it's not for me. I'd rather sit down here on the beach and throw stones. Right. And so, but I got really interested in it. And as I read through the legislative packet on the second, when that, TCOLE they didn't get done in the first one. And I think that the legislature identified issues and problems that in Texas law enforcement where there could be improvements. And I really became interested in it. And I had some key mentors that really encouraged me. And I talked to some other people. And so that was that. And here we sit. I started in January. It was a long process. I really had kind of thought, maybe they're not interested. I was pretty...
It was a long process.
I was pretty frank, pretty honest in the interviews. And so I thought, maybe they're not looking for my personality. I don't know. Turns out they were. And the presiding officer called me. And then a few months later, I started in January.
Rest is history. And we want to talk about TCOLE with both of you. Before, though, I'd like to hear talk about the differences between being a chief at a 400-officer department and a 20-officer department.
Well, I'll tell you, it gives you perspective. It really does, because it's different. One thing for me personally, in a department this size of Lubbock, you're a bureaucrat. I mean, you do paperwork, you go to meetings. It's you're not as involved. And a part of also in looking at so when I took the job in Lubbock in 2015, there was a plan on the table to build a new police department, and it was a one big building. It's like a compound, but we hadn't chosen where to build it, the location. And I kind of inherited that plan, and I sort of facetiously said, well, where's the moat? A couple people, they kind of, what? So this isn't going to work. This isn't community policing. I mean, you're going to have the officers, you have to have security for your police facility, sure, but all it's missing is a moat and alligators and a drawbridge. This isn't going to work. And you had people and I'm a believer that, you really want your headquarters to be downtown, but Lubbock's downtown's not centrally located. People say, no, we need to put it somewhere center of the city. Well, here's maybe the Lubbock Business Park, which is further away from down. So there was all this consternation over that. And I came into it and I said, well, Lubbock's not going to slow down. When a city gets to that 250,000 mark or so, it begins to feed on itself. It's only going to grow. And we got to act like a big city. And I laid the plan out and said, we need to have a modest headquarters downtown, patrol substations out in the city so that the officers are connected with the community. And that's what we ended up doing. But I'll tell you, as I kind of got into that, I thought, man, this is a lot bigger than where I was at when I started here. And I'd see a kid in uniform coming down the hallway, and he might have been on the PD 2-3 years. I had no idea who he or she was. I don't know who this is. And that's good. The department had to grow. In fact, it probably still, I don't know the numbers and stuff now. I think it probably needs to grow still. Probably don't have the number of officers they need, number of things they need. So it was a little bit refreshing when I got down to Rockport, and it's 27 officers. And I knew each one of them, by name. I knew a little of their personal history, knew who they were. And one of the big differences is when you got 4 people on the streets and you get one on vacation, somebody calls in sick, you got 2, and I may end up taking a call myself. Detectives have to leave the building. You'll take a call. So you're more connected with the officers, but you're a lot more connected with the community. And in Lubbock, of course, I was on the news and I was out doing stuff in the community, but at a much higher level. Where here, I'm going to people's house, sitting down with them and talking with them about a problem they have in their community. And so it's a big dichotomy in those two. You don't have as much money in a town that size, so finding equipment is difficult.
Training.
Training can't get them. One, finding the training and paying for the training, but sending people. The training's expensive all the way around with manpower.
Can't spare 'em.
Right.
Yeah, can't spare the people to go to training. And so it's a vast difference. But what what I said when I first started is it gives me the perspective. It's helping me in this new role now because I understand what a big city chief is facing and what a small town chief is facing. Same thing with sheriffs, constables, what they're both facing. It helps me understand what we need to do in this organization to serve each whatever kind of agency it is.
And it's funny when you get in a law enforcement career, you only know what you know.
That's right.
And from your perspective at the time, you're like, well, I really know all of this. And was visiting with an officer at a very, very large agency, a couple thousand man agency. And they're like, yeah, when we make an arrest, we pretty much drop them off to jail. And I was like, well, when do you do probable cause affidavit? When do you do this? And all the various aspects of police work. And then you go to West Texas or East Texas, and you go to a 12-man agency. They take the report, they go to the call, they investigate the case, they file the case, they collect evidence, they're probably taking photos, they may know how to fingerprint. And it's just funny that you only know what you know, and people at a big agency think they do the best police work or they know all the police work. People at smaller agencies, they only know what they know, and they're doing the best police work that they know. And it's just weird how different it can be. And really kind of the misnomers about small agencies. There's a lot of small agencies where you have a 12-man department, man and woman department, and you got a few people that can do every single thing in police work there is, where most cops wouldn't know how to go lift a latent fingerprint or what photos are needed. Or it's just interesting to see because
100%.
I only knew what I knew at Garland, and now after being here and seeing kind of like your perspective, you get to see a whole lot different. It's weird because you learn, well, I only knew what I knew.
That's right.
There's a whole lot more out there.
The more you learn, the more you realize you never knew anything at all.
Yes.
But I'm telling you, as the agency that's supposed to set these standards and rules for the entire law enforcement profession statewide, you do learn how difficult it is to apply those standards to the Houston Police Department and the small town 1 or 2 person police department and try to figure out the economies of scale that go on in just applying training standards and training requirements, much less all the other agency standards that come along with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you came in at an interesting time. You came in a sunset, right?
I did.
So let's talk about that a little bit. What kind of challenges did that present?
Well, I'll tell you. First of all, I'll say that what I stepped into, because I didn't know what I was getting into. You don't know what you don't know, and I came into an agency full of folks that are dedicated, one, to law enforcement. They truly believe in what they're doing. It's a mission-focused organization, which was a little bit surprising. I don't know why, because I didn't know what I was getting into. What I base that on is, sadly, unfortunately, most organizations, whether they're public, private, whatever, they're not typically mission-focused. It's a lack of, I think, leadership in society and culture, but most places are not real. They don't. You hang a mission statement on the wall, and that's, well, we're good. We got our leadership down. So, but the people at TCOLE, when I walked in, and I credit this a lot to John Beecham, to the interim executive director, did a really good job, especially when they're handed Senate Bill 1445. They're handed this mission, this direction. They're rallied behind it, and they believe in what they're doing. And I think that most of them, I'm quite sure that all of them could probably make a lot more money doing something different in the civilian sector, especially in the Austin market, right? And so they're all very dedicated to what they're doing. So I found that as soon as I got in, the stage at where we're at for the Sunset Bill implementation, the legislature said that, hey, you got to form these committees who will come up with these new rules, with these model policies that every agency across the state will adopt, or something very substantively similar. that was well underway. And John Beecham did a great job along with Gretchen and the other directors and the whole staff. They made these committees, and again, so when these roll out, and some of them are already rolling out, we can talk about those in a minute, but these new model policies, these new rules, they are they're created by this diverse cross-section of Texas law enforcement. They've got chiefs and sheriffs, school district, higher education chiefs, constables. There's some from the El Paso area, from behind the Pine Curtain, from deep in the Rio Grande Valley, the Panhandle, all over Central Texas, the Metroplex, all brought together to create what is a sea change of Texas law enforcement. It's a sea change. It's all big stuff, and that's what got me interested again as I read through what the legislature had imposed. It wasn't just a bureaucratic edict that came out. It was created by Texas law enforcement for Texas law enforcement. So all of that was just about done when I stepped in. The committees only had maybe 2 more meetings when I came in. The process was solid. Now, it's not perfect by any means. And there's going to be plenty of officers, rank and file officers, chiefs, sheriffs, and constables that don't like some of it. What my message would be is that, hey, we're certainly going to tweak these as we go along, but these were created by your peers. They were not created in a bureaucratic vacuum in Austin, Texas. They were created by your peers from across the state. And so, to your point, my job now has become, because this is really sort of handed to me with all of these, and then voted on and approved by the commission, by the 9 people appointed by the governor. So my job now is to implement these new rules, ensure that agencies adopt the new policies, and then we have hard deadlines, one of which just passed, which was September 1st for the public license lookup. That's caused some concern, consternation out across the landscape.
Have the phones been ringing?
They have been ringing off the hook, but not in the way that you would think. It's more the technology side and making sure that the user logging can get in. And that actually is because at the same time we rolled out the IAM, the access management part of it, where you had to re-enroll in your TCOLE and your TCLEDS accounts. But honestly,
so not officers upset about the privacy issue.
No, surprisingly,
I'll tell you, we really went on. One of the things that I wanted to do is go out across the state on an education
Tour.
Yeah, just a big endeavor to make sure that we're in front of. Again, I don't want to just hand out stuff from Austin. I want to go out and get in front of the licensed community and explain what we're doing, explain these changes, to make sure everyone understands, because we don't want to be a gotcha agency. We don't want to be adversarial. Because here's what I know is that all of these big changes, no way TCOLE is going to get this done on our own. We don't have the resources, nor is it smart or wise to try to manage this from an adversarial, just pure regulatory mindset. The only way that we'll meet the legislature's intent, the legislature's expectations, is to work in concert with and in partnership with Texas law enforcement. And not just the chiefs, the sheriffs, constables, the agency heads. We've got to work with rank and file officers who are greatly impacted when you say, hey, there's this new public license lookup where people can look you up. Wait a minute. Whoa. And we want to be able to explain, hey, it all is currently public information. It's no change in that. It's just now people don't have to file an open records request with TCOLE.
Right.
It's your PSR is what it is. We go and we explain it. We've done our very best to get out across the state in person, explaining this stuff, and leaning on word of mouth more than just official emails. And I think now that people look at that and go, all right, whatever, it's fine.
The biggest points of anxiety were your photo was going to be out there or your address was going to be out there, and that is in no way the case.
Yeah.
In that database is only currently licensed, correct?
So it actually goes back further than that. If you are a TCOLE licensee, then there is access to that information, whether you're currently appointed or not appointed. Yes. It will show whether you are active or not, but it does go back further than just those who are currently active.
Gotcha.
And it's essentially, you're a licensed professional in the state of Texas. Same as an attorney, same as a doctor, same as a plumber.
Hairdresser.
Same as a hairdresser.
Right.
And so, again, I think it's part of y'all's mission statement to have professional law enforcement officers that were licensed professionals. And so we're like everyone else now. Again, it doesn't offer them a way to get in touch with you. One difference, it does show where you work. Again, if someone's looking you up, probably know that already anyway. But it makes available where you went to the police academy, what kind of training you are. You can see if you're a specialized officer, if you've got specialized classes, things like that. It'll show if you've ever had your license disciplined by TCOLE. That's in there. Same thing with an attorney, if they've ever had action taken against them by the state bar, doctors with the state, medical association. So, again, I think that the public expects that kind of transparency. We haven't run into any officers that think that's a terrible idea. It's just been concern over, hey, does this bring danger to me? Does this put too much of my personal identifying information out there? And it doesn't.
Well, and the unknown is scary.
100%.
Cops are scared of the unknown.
Hence the education endeavor that we've gone on to try to take that unknown factor out so that we reduce the anxiety. And then, honestly, we can get past this one and move on to what are much bigger changes under the sunset provisions.
So, thinking about some of the challenges with the bill and implementation, Texas is unique in the amount of small departments we have. We have, over 2,800 law enforcement agencies?
Correct.
Many of them are 1, 2, 3 officer departments. Are those departments going to have a harder time, in your opinion, implementing the changes?
It's possible. I think so.
Because of funding, or?
I think funding is one of the biggest issues. They typically, it's like the dichotomy of Lubbock versus Rockport, right? We didn't have as much money. They don't have as big of a tax base. They're more difficult to buy. The minimum standards part of Senate Bill 1445 requires certain minimum equipment, right? Some policy issues, things like that. And so it is going to be, I think, a challenge for some jurisdictions to buy, to furnish unexpired vests, but no one's going to argue that that's not a good idea, and we shouldn't be doing that. Again, we want to work in partnership with those jurisdictions to get every agency, regardless of size, up to that minimum standard. We want to work in partnership to get everyone up to that level. Agencies that may struggle with those minimum standards, we're going to do what we can do to help those out. But again, I think that if a jurisdiction can't provide minimum equipment, minimum policies, then we have to ask the hard question, and it's an earnest question: should that law enforcement agency be there? And as far as the officers that are working there, they're not in the best situation, not in the best position. And so,
from our perspective, we want our members to go home at night.
That's 100%. Yeah.
And so equipment training is vitally important.
And I think it holds leadership accountable also of those agencies, because sometimes just because you can doesn't mean you should. And we have some very well ran 5 and 8 officer agencies.
Sure.
And we have some 20 and 30 officer agencies that we get calls from year-round, all year, because they're horribly ran, they're not managed well, they're not equipped well, they're not trained, they're nothing. And sometimes the answer we have to give them is, sorry, it's not illegal to work at a horrible place, a very poor ran, poor managed place. And so I think too, this will hold some leaders accountable.
It will.
If you're wanting to have your little circus, then you need to run it well.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk. It's been a lot of talk for years now about holding cops accountable. We also need to hold our sheriffs and police chiefs accountable.
Well, in the county government and the city government as well.
Yes,
it holds across the board.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And one of the things that part of the conversation is whenever we talk about it's this conversation on statistics with the and it always says the 1 and 2 person agencies, the 3 man agencies. Again, but there's types of agencies that you've got. There's categories of agencies. Remember that can, because I don't have the statistics in front of me, but when you say it, and again, I'm kind of making this up, I don't have it in front of me, but 50% of all agencies have fewer than 10 officers, whatever that's, and those are true statistics. But remember that some of those are a district attorney's office where you've got 2 investigators. That's a different animal than a small town with 2 officers, different animal than a city's fire marshal's office, a municipal court with their 2. So you have to break these into categories when we start looking at them, and their funding is going to be different as well. And so, but from our perspective, we're going to work with whatever the agency is, whatever type it is. We're going to work with them, work with that leadership, work with the jurisdiction, make sure they know what these new rules are, and understand that, like you just said, both of you said, it's for the benefit of the individual officer and it's for the benefit of the community. One, that the officer goes home, they have it properly equipped, and we always kind of glaze over the policies. The whole idea of having the right policies in place, the officers deserve to have good policies so they know what the bar ditches are. They know what the guardrails are. Whether your pursuit policy, which is one that's required, whether it's wide open, pursue what you want, or whether it's very restrictive, no pursuits unless it's this, that, or the other. The officers need to know that. That's how they stay out of trouble. Absolutely. And so you have to have these requirements in place. And that's a reasonable expectation that if you're going to run a law enforcement agency, that you have a use of force policy. You have, here's one of the big ones, an off-duty work policy, so that you know, we see, again, my long law enforcement career, I've seen a lot of young officers get jammed up when they're working at an off-duty job.
We see our from and agencies. We see it every day. We get the calls, so we defend them. Yeah.
And agencies too.
100%. So that's a reasonable policy that if you're going to operate at a law enforcement agency, that the troop deserves to have that policy in place, right? And so they all make sense. Like I said, the reason I got interested in this job is this is all good stuff. I don't see any that are bad, really. It's going to need to be tweaked. It's not perfect by any means. And I kind of trust that with good advice, the legislature will do a good job at tweaking it where it needs to be. Advice from you all, advice from the Sheriff's Association, advice from the Chiefs Association, constables. Once we get into this and we see something that needs to have a little tweak, do that and tweak it as we go along. But all in all, I think it's good legislation. It does good things for law enforcement. And back to the one point I was making, it's good for the individual officers, but it's good for the communities they serve.
That's a huge point.
At the end of the day, it's good for the people that are relying on law enforcement. And I always try to make this point that remember, when someone dials, here's what we're all here for. Well, every one of us are here for. When someone dials 911, they're not asking for the chief. I've learned this. They're not asking for usually not a detective. When American citizens call 911, they want a uniformed patrol officer, deputy, trooper, whatever, show up in a marked car in a reasonable amount of time and say, "Man, what can I do for you?" Call the police. "I'm here. What can I do for you?" That's the goal. That's the ultimate goal. And it takes a lot to do that.
And professional.
Exactly. 100%.
Your point about the community. I've got a Northeast Texas agency paying $12 an hour, and they suffer there. They have turnover there. They have a lot of issues there. Well, the county judge there wants to blame it on, well, I don't have any professionals that work here. Sure. Well, I disagree with that, number one. But number two, at $12 an hour, when they can go to Buc-ee's and make $18 an hour, don't blame. There's no one else to blame. And he asked during a commissioner's court one day, well, what would you suggest? I said, I'd suggest they all leave today and go to Buc-ee's and help their family improve their lifestyle and leave today. And he said, well, it's just not even in the equation. And it's a vicious circle, but $12 an hour, it's hard to attract a truly professional. And they have a lot of good people at that agency, but it's because they grew up there and their heart is with that community. But there's nobody from an hour away going to go, well, I'd sure like to move down there an hour away and make $12 an hour. And it's the community that pays for that not pays for it. It's the community that suffers for that.
I'm curious, I want to talk to you guys about the accession with less than 4 months out. Yes. However, before we do, address your thoughts on and both of you, please, the recruitment and retention crisis. What can we do to, in your opinion, to attract, the Navy SEAL coming out, into the workforce, or, the squared away,
or Air Force or Marine.
Exactly.
Well, don't have to be in the Navy. Come on.
Well, hold on. Now, I'm retired Navy. So back to my history or whatever. So I did my 4 years active duty, and then I was out altogether. I wanted to go back in the reserves, and they'd closed Reese Air Force Base up in Lubbock, and I didn't have the money to travel every month, and so I went in, re-enlisted in the Navy. Had to drop. I was an E4 when I got to the Air Force. Had to drop down to E3, and they call it striking for a rating, and so I struck for Master at Arms. Continued as military police in the Navy, and did that for another 10 years, I don't know, a little bit longer than that. I got recalled after the attacks in 2001, and when I got back in 2002, that's when I went to college and finished a degree, and then I got a commission as an intel officer in the Navy, naval intelligence officer. That was in 2005, and I retired in 2015, right before I got the chief's job. And so So whether you're recruiting an airman, a sailor, a Marine, or a soldier, doesn't matter. Even a Coast Guard guy, we'll take Coast Guard, whoever, doesn't matter. We'll take anybody out of the military. I'll tell you this, that I think that TCOLE absolutely has a part to play in recruiting and retention. We absolutely have a vested interest and need to participate at the highest level. Starts with working, in partnership with the licensed community and with our every association. It's you guys. It's all the Chiefs Association. Everyone. It's a conversation we've had at IATLIST. Of course, I'm more interested in recruiting in Texas, but nationwide approach, getting people interested in law enforcement again. And a couple of the things that I think about it in it. One, if you look at it from the standpoint of the sunset legislation, which raises standards, I'm one of those chiefs that I think that we should never lower standards whatsoever. And in conversations, I know when I first became a chief and I would go to the limit, every chief has to go to limit, right? And I'm in a conversation, and it was one of the very large cities chiefs, gone, retired, not with the city anymore. This chief was talking about the difficulty in getting people there, and actually said, I think I'm gonna pull down this standard and pull down that standard. I was the first one to say, that's a terrible idea. And that chief looked at me and took a little of offense, because I came from Lubbock, which was, less than half the size. And I said, listen, I've a long military career, and I'm telling you, in fact, I would raise a couple standards. If you're having, and it's whether you're in business, whatever you're in, people want to be part of something difficult. And that's one of our problems right now is I think, and I know this will come across wrong, people won't like it when I say this, but I think we've made it too easy to get into the profession, and we've made it too easy to stay in the profession sometimes. We absolutely have to hold the line on standards, and we have to. We talked briefly before about training and basic peace officer training. It's got to be difficult. It has to be. It was when I came through. It was difficult when y'all both came through. And when Gretchen's husband went through, it was difficult. It has to be difficult. People want to be a part of something that's difficult. And I'm not talking just with physical fitness. The academics have to be difficult. Every bit of it has to be difficult.
But you're aware that departments nationwide are lowering standards. They're lowering hiring standards. They're lowering FTO program standards because they're desperate for bodies.
And there's our opportunity. This is twofold opportunity. We can hold the line on ours. We could even ratchet a little bit, and people. So that's one part. We can be the outlier, and people are going to want to be a part. The good men and women who want to be in law enforcement, they know that. And I think that's why they're having so much, because people see that and they're like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I want to do something different. I want to go into the military, get into a career field that's difficult and hard, that challenges me. And if they look, they go, but look at what Texas is doing, and think about how many people are moving to Texas right now. We have this untapped pool of people coming in here, and part of what we're looking at. So there's already it's the supplemental peace officer training program that we've got that allows out-of-state officers, federal officers to come through. I'll call it a shortcut. I don't really like the name because that sounds like abbreviated is better. I like abbreviated. So we're reviewing that and looking at it and saying, well, what can we do maybe to tweak that? Because right now it's a one-size-fits-all. Doesn't matter what state you're coming in from, it applies to you.
Is it where they can challenge the test?
Challenge.
Correct.
Okay.
You have to go through some training before you're able to take the test, but it is much shortened from your traditional peace officer.
Yeah, because I think the challenge, I know when I moved here, even I looked into it, and it was, in addition to working full-time, it wasn't something I really wanted to do. It would have been a little bit easier, a little bit faster track.
And so what we want to do is look at those states where they already have high standards, they already have a good basic peace officer academy, and maybe tweaking it to where it is more appealing. But now you get Newton's law here. It's going to be something opposite of that. Well, there are a lot of states out there that don't have that difficult of a process. We may have to put a little more into it to make sure that we're getting only high quality people, and that if you came from somewhere that don't have the standards that Texans expect, then here's what it would look like.
And that would present a challenge, because then TCOLE would be doing background investigations just basically before allowing them.
Yeah, or maybe recognize certain states. Tennessee, we know, has a high level. Oklahoma, we know, has a high level. If you apply from these states, this is path A is what you do. And if any other states, your path B, I guess?
That's right. And that program was created when TCOLE didn't have the resources really to look at every single state. Well, now we have more resources. And in this next budget year, because to try to keep up with all of this, with the growing Texas law enforcement industry, we're asking for more resources. And that would be something we'd want to do as we try to recruit more people into Texas and into Texas law enforcement. There's also a pathway for military folks. If you're military police, if you were special forces or the Navy SEAL, whoever you're talking about, we can get them in that as well. But here's the thing: well, a lot of people don't know about that. We Texas are not doing a ton of recruiting in that, and we should. And I think that's something that TCOLE can look at down the road. The agencies are doing it, but I think that we have a vested interest in being a part of that. Because again, we would be recruiting people to get a Texas peace officer license and then try to get them to work somewhere.
Go ahead.
One of the really important things to keep in mind with all of this is that our goal is to set people up for success, whether it's the individual officer or the agency. And when you talk about an officer coming from out of state, most of that supplemental peace officer course that they have to go through is to get them up to speed on Texas laws and Texas regulations so that they don't go out on the road and think with the mindset of having come from whatever state they came from and understand that the Texas Penal Code and the Texas CCP apply here, and that's the standard that you've got to go by. And so I don't think there's ever a situation where you can just come in from any state, any federal agency or the military and just come right in. We had that challenge the test concept from decades ago, and I think there's a solid reason why we came away from that and at least have that minimum standard in place where you got to understand the laws that you're enforcing.
On the next episode of Blue Grit Podcast.
And so we have to have these partnerships in place. And maybe that's my bias also at being in the world of government relations where it's all about relationships. But those relationships are important. That's what makes the world go around. That's what makes us even have a chance of being successful. And that's us in the greater sense.
At 2 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday. And I think that is a grand opportunity that we in Texas can lean into to make Texas the best place to do law enforcement, and that will help with recruiting and retention as well.